Hey everyone, it's Kate, and today is the first day of our chai tea sew along, and I'll be talking about cutting out knits. It's also the last day of our semi-annual sale, so today's the last day you can save 20% store-wide. Today is September 12th, 2020, in case you're watching this on YouTube. But I want to talk a little bit more about cutting out knits. I talked about it on Wednesday in my overall how to sew with knits video. But I really like to cut out my knits on a single layer because the edges of knits tend to curl. Lots of times the selvages will be really curly, and it will be really hard to fold your knit and make sure that the underneath fabric is on grain. And if you've ever bought a cheap t-shirt, or maybe even an expensive t-shirt, and washed it and had it kind of start going around your body like this, the side seams, that's because it wasn't cut on grain. So because I like to cut my knits out on grain, I mean, not on grain, in a single layer, I have to do a little finagling with the pieces that are supposed to be cut on the fold, because I'm not folding. And there are two options. One, so this is the back piece for this chai tea. So this is how it comes in the package. And then, but what I do is trace it and then flip it and make a pattern piece that is the double, so that I can just lay this on a single layer of fabric and cut around it. The other method I use is the trace and flip method right on the fabric. And I tend to do the trace and flip before I know if I really love a pattern. I hate spending the time to totally trace everything when I don't even know if I'm going to make it again. So I'm going to show you with the front piece how I trace the half of the pattern piece right on the fabric and then flip it. So here's in the overhead, you can see this is the front pattern piece as it comes in the package, and it says to cut on the fold. And another hard thing with knits, I've mentioned it, is that the edges tend to curl, the selvages. On this fabric, the selvages aren't really curling, but when they do curl, it's really hard to measure that you're on grain from the edge like you traditionally do. But knit fabric is really just a knit sweater, but really tiny. So you can actually see the wales of the knit and line up. You might have to use some really strong glasses, but you can line up the edge that's supposed to be on the fold parallel to the knit wales. So I've done that, and I have traced around the edge of 1/2 of the pattern piece. And for this fabric, my tailor's wax worked the best, so that's what I used. And I tend to just do just lots of little dots because I don't want to skew the fabric in any way. And then I make a really strong kind of L mark at the bottom and the top. And then I'm able to flip the pattern piece and line it up here and line it up down here. Can you see that? Okay, down. Then, oh, there we go. And then I like to use pattern weights. You can pin. I just find pattern weights faster and make my cutting a little bit more accurate. And then I would just cut out the whole thing right along my tracing mark, and then around this upside down pattern piece with my rotary cutter. And I would have my front piece all cut out without folding the fabric. I'm not going to do that whole thing because that could get really boring. But I am gonna cut out the sleeve and show you another little thing. I'm gonna have to move the fabric a little bit so that you can see. It's a little bit caught. There we go. So adorkable. Okay. So many things. Okay, so this is the sleeve, which is really fun because you just fold it. You don't have to hem it or anything. So this is the sleeve, and it is not cut on the fold, but this is the grain line. And with this fabric that didn't really curl at the edges, I was able to measure from this edge to the top of the grain line and from this edge to the bottom of the grain line to make sure I was on grain. But if this edge were super wavy, you would just want to fold your pattern piece along the grain line so that you can eyeball that you are parallel to the knit wales. On a pattern piece like this with all these curves, it's really hard because you can't use a different edge to line up on the grain. So that's what I would do. I would just fold the fabric. And I am going to cut this out really quick. I cut out everything with a rotary cutter because I feel like I can be more accurate without putting in a ton more effort because I'm lazy-ish. But also, especially with knits, you know, if you put some scissors underneath the knit and kind of, you're going to be lifting it up and the knit's going to stretch on you, and it'll be much less accurate. So, and also I feel like when I cut knits with a scissors, I get a lot more of a choppy look than when I cut wovens with scissors. So this, I'm trying not to lean over too much, which means I don't have quite enough pressure. And I'm using a small rotary cutter today. I sometimes use bigger ones, but okay. So now I've cut out the pattern piece, and it has a lot of notches. It's got 3 notches up here and 3 notches down here, and then the halfway point at each end. And with knits, especially, a lot of them have just a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All of our Jolie patterns have just a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this one, I think, has a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I find that if I do a little snip where the notches are, I sometimes snip a little too far and I end up with a little hole in the seam of my garment. I have a pajama top that I did that to. It wasn't supposed to be a pajama top, but now it is because I don't want to walk around with a big hole in the seam. It's not a big hole, it's a small little snip, and it doesn't really fray, which is cool, but I still don't feel proud of it. So what I do at each notch is put a pin in with the ball out, my favorite way. And when I was researching this, I learned that there are things called ballpoint pins, which are perfect for knits, which I didn't know about. So I always just use a really sharp, fine pin with my knits, and I haven't had any snagging issues. If you use a really old pin, a big, old, dull pin, you might snag your knit, but just be careful. So I would break out my new pins for a knit project. So I've just got around. This is an extensive amount of notches, but so I've gone all the way around, and my pattern piece is ready. I've got a pin at every notch, and sometimes I put them in a couple times just to make sure that they stay, but now I will know where the notches are, and I don't have to worry about them rubbing off or if snipping too far or anything like that. So that is how I do the notches. And then a couple more tips. I'm just going to move this sleeve out of the way. This pattern has a yoke on the shoulder. Yeah, don't freak out. When I saw this yoke, I was like, is this supposed to go all the way across my back? No, it's just for the shoulder. And the instructions say to cut 4 on the fold, which means you'll have 2 sets of 2 mirror images. And I ended up, because I was cutting on a single layer, I ended up cutting 3 right side up and 1 upside down, and it didn't work. So I decided to make a mirror image pattern piece. And so here, yeah. So I made a mirror image pattern piece, and I'm going to cut 2 of this one and 2 of this one. And then so that I will have 4 and they'll be mirror images and they'll work. And then finally, I'm going to grab my prop, my quilter's ruler. So the neckband for this tee is 1.5 inches wide by about 28 inches long. And I think I've already lost the pattern piece, but what I do for that is just pull out my quilter's ruler and cut a big long 1.5 inches wide strip of fabric, and I make it a little bit longer than it asks for, just so that I'm sure I have enough. And next week I'm going to show you how I apply a neckband so that the fabric is stretched to the exact right amount. I don't sew it in a circle before I sew it to the neckline, and I'll show you how I do that. So that'll be fun. And once again, it's the last day of the sale. Let me know if you have any questions about cutting out knits. I'll be going into a lot of detail on how to sew knits starting next week. And also, so today's Saturday. On Wednesday, I'll be starting to sew on this project. And then a week from today, I have a special guest, Karen Winther, who is from Missoula, and she does big stitch quilting. And she's going to talk to us about how to do it. She's going to do a demo, and she's going to show us a bunch of examples of how she's done it. So I'm excited to have her, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Thanks for watching.